Daily Heavenly Manna, October 5th. The chosen text from Hebrew chapter 12, verses 3. Consider him who endured such contradiction of sinners against himself, lest ye be wearied and faint in your minds. Explanation. Alas, how many of God's true children become weary and faint in their minds and are in danger of losing the chief prize because they have failed to think upon, to study out, to confront, to consider the Lord and what He faithfully endured of opposition, as they would consider His perfection and how, as represented in Him, the light shined in darkness and was not appreciated. So they would accept that the light shining from them would not be appreciated either, as they would consider how the Lord suffered in every sense unjustly and for righteousness' sake, and then would reflect that their own conduct, even though well meant, is imperfect. It would strengthen them to endure hardness as good soldiers and not to be weary in well doing and not to faint under opposition. Reprint number 3313. Amen.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're looking at a pretty focused piece of source material. It's a devotional excerpt from October 5th, and it centers on just one core instruction, really, for building mental resilience. It's from Hebrews 12.3. Consider him who endured such contradiction sinners against himself, lest you be wearied and faint in your minds. So our mission here is to kind of unpack that, get past the older language and find the actual psychological mechanism. How does focusing on someone else's struggles stop us from fainting mentally?
What's the practical advice here for avoiding burnout?
Exactly. What's the antidote it's prescribing?
And it's important, according to this text, it really warns that a lot of people striving towards a goal, its language is God's true children, but it applies broadly, they become weary and faint in their minds. And if that happens, the danger is losing the chief prize. So basically, mental fatigue can derail your whole purpose. The fight, it says, is really mental.
Okay, so if the mind's the battleground, the source says the reason we lose is pretty straightforward. We lose focus. It argues that weariness sets in because we have failed to think upon, to study out, to comprehend, to consider the Lord and what he faithfully endured.
We just don't contemplate it enough. That's the root failure it identifies. We get bogged down in our immediate problems and forget the bigger picture, the ultimate example.
Right. We lose that frame of reference.
And that failure to contemplate leads us straight into the remedy the text suggests. It seems to have two main parts, two shifts in how you think. The first one is about managing your expectations. What you expect from the outside world regarding your own efforts, your own light, as the source calls it.
Okay, managing expectations. How?
Well, it argues that if you really take on board how Christ's perfect ministry was received, and the idea that the light shined in darkness and was not appreciated, then you should immediately adjust what you expect for yourself. If perfection itself met rejection, well, it kind of follows that the light coming from your imperfect work
might not be appreciated either.
Exactly. It probably won't be, at least not universally.
That makes sense. It sort of takes the personal sting out of opposition, doesn't it?
It does.
Instead of thinking, why are they rejecting me? Or what did I do wrong? You reframe it.
You see it as, okay, this friction, this contradiction is almost expected. It's part of the deal when you're trying to any kind of light or positive change. It stops being a personal failure.
Yeah, it's just the cost of doing business, so to speak.
Right. But that's only the first part. That external shift then leads to the second, maybe harder internal shift. This one's about self-reflection and justice.
Okay, so the source draws a contrast here. It emphasizes that Christ suffered in every sense unjustly and for righteousness' sake, purely undeserved.
Yes, and that's the absolute benchmark. Perfect injustice met perfect righteousness.
Right.
Now, when followers compare that standard to their own struggles, the source says they need to reflect. reflect that their own actions, their own conduct,
Even if they mean well.
even if well-meant, is imperfect. They make mistakes. They have flaws.
But wait, wouldn't focusing on my own imperfections just make me feel worse? Like lead to self-criticism or guilt? How does that strengthen resolve?
That's a really good question. The text implies it strengthens resolve because it provides context, not just condemnation. See, if you believe you're suffering perfectly and unjustly like Christ did, you can feel like a total victim. And that feeling can be crushing, utterly wearying.
Okay.
But the source argues, if you reflect honestly on your own imperfections, the times you maybe didn't handle things perfectly or said the wrong thing, or your motives weren't 100% pure, you realize something.
What's that?
You realize that maybe not all the opposition you face is pure, unjust persecution for righteousness' sake. Some of it might be, well, maybe a little bit warranted, or at least understandable, given your own human limitations.
So it tempers the sense of victimhood. It adds nuance.
Precisely. It adds that crucial layer of self-awareness. And that's what helps people endure hardness as good soldiers, as the text says, acknowledging the gap between the Lord's perfectly unjust suffering and their own more mixed, imperfect situation. That actually builds resilience. It helps you not to be weary in well-doing and not to faint under opposition. You manage your self-pity, basically.
Okay, I see. So pulling it together, the antidote to fainting in your mind, according to the source, has these two connected parts. First, manage external expectations. Remember, even perfection faced rejection. And second, manage internal perspective. Honestly reflect on your own imperfections compared to that perfect standard.
That's the core of it. Those two shifts provide the mental framework needed to keep pushing forward towards whatever that chief prize is for you.
Got it. A powerful mechanism.
It really is. And it leaves us with something interesting to think about, maybe for you to explore on your own after this. The source makes such a strong point about the contrast, the Lord's perfect and unjust suffering versus the follower's imperfect conduct, even when well-meaning. So the question to mull over is, when you look at the opposition you face, what does recognizing that distinction between absolute injustice and your own unavoidable imperfections tell you about where that friction might really be coming from, and how should that insight shape your response?